The Bremen Town Musicians. Once upon a time, in a quiet village at the edge of the fields, there lived an ass who had labored faithfully for his master. Many a year had he borne sacks of grain to the mill, trudging patiently through dust and rain, summer heat and winter frost. Yet time spares no creature, and at last his strength began to wane. Each passing day left him slower, his back bent with weariness, his steps heavy upon the road. Now the master, seeing that the beast could no longer earn his keep, began to whisper in his heart that it might be best to cast the poor creature off. But the ass, wise in the ways of men, felt the chill of misfortune drawing near. He guessed that his master's kindness was ending, and that only hunger or death awaited him. Therefore, while dawn still lay pale on the earth, the ass shook the dust from his mane and set out upon the highway. "I will go to Bremen," thought he, "for in that city I may turn musician. Better to lift my voice in song than to sink in silence." Not long had he gone when he came upon a hound lying by the roadside, his tongue lolling, his sides panting, as if he had fled a great chase. "Ho, there, hold fast," said the ass. "What makes you so faint of breath?" "Alas," groaned the dog, "my running days are spent. Age has stolen the swiftness from my limbs, and my master, finding me useless, swore to strike me down. So I slipped away in the night. Yet I know not how to earn my bread." "Fear not," said the ass kindly. "I myself am bound for Bremen to become a town musician. Come with me and take up music too. I shall play the lute with my hoof, and you may beat the drum with your paws. Together we shall make such noise as none can deny." The dog wagged his weary tail and rose gladly, and the two went on side by side. Soon they met a cat sitting in the dust of the road, her whiskers drooping, her eyes dull, as if 3 rainy days had settled in her fur. "Well now, old fireside singer," called the ass, "why do you look so mournful?" "Should I not mourn?" sighed the cat. "My teeth have grown blunt, my claws weak, and I would sooner sit by the hearth and purr than I chase after nimble mice. But my mistress, hard of heart, wished to drown me in the well. So I crept away, yet no path lies open to me." "Then come with us to Bremen," urged the ass. "There you may lend your voice to our songs, for no serenade is complete without the purring of a cat." The cat licked her whiskers, found the plan pleasing, and joined them on the road. By and by, they reached a farmyard where a cock stood upon the gate, crowing till his throat was hoarse. "Your cry pierces bone and marrow," said the ass. "Why raise you such a clamor?" "Because my life is near its end," crowed the cock. "This morning I foretold fair weather for the washing day, and by evening my mistress has promised me to the cook. At nightfall my neck shall be wrung, and tomorrow I shall simmer in the pot. So I crow while yet I may. Better sing with us than perish in broth," said the ass. "Come, Chanticleer, your voice shall be the crown of our harmony. Bremen awaits." The cock flapped his wings and gladly assented. Thus the 4 companions set out together, each lighter of heart for having found new hope. But Bremen was far, too far to reach in a single day. And when twilight fell, they came into a dark wood. The ass and the dog lay themselves beneath a broad tree. The cat climbed among its branches, and the cock flew up to the highest bough, deeming it the safest place. Before sleep closed his eyes, he looked around on every side, and far off in the night he spied a glimmer of light. "There is a house not far from here," he cried down. "If so, let us go," said the ass, "for these quarters are rough indeed." The dog's mouth watered at the thought of bones not yet picked clean, and they all pressed on toward the glow. Step by step, the light grew larger until they reached a house bright with many lamps. Peering through the window, the ass beheld a table laden with meats and drink, and around it sat a band of robbers feasting. "Would that we might sit there," whispered the cock. "Aye," said the ass, "if only those villains were gone." Then they took counsel and devised a plan. The ass placed his forefeet on the windowsill. The dog leapt upon his back. The cat climbed onto the dog, and the cock perched high upon the cat's head. At a signal, they raised their music. The ass brayed, the dog barked, the cat screeched, and the cock crowed with all his might. The window burst open with their uproar, and into the chamber they sprang. The robbers, thinking some demon host had fallen upon them, leapt up in terror and fled into the forest, leaving their feast behind. Then the 4 companions seated themselves at table and ate as if they had hungered a month. When the meal was ended, they quenched the lamps, and each sought a bed suited to his kind. The ass lay upon the dung heap, the dog stretched behind the door, the cat curled herself upon the warm hearth, and the cock perched aloft in the rafters. Soon they all slept soundly. But at midnight, the robbers, seeing from afar that the house was dark and still, grew bold. Their captain sent one back to spy. This fellow crept in and went to strike a light in the kitchen. taking the gleaming eyes of the cat for coals, he bent near with a match. Straightway, the cat flew at his face, spitting and clawing. The man shrieked, stumbled to the door, and there the dog sprang up and bit his leg. Howling, he dashed across the yard, and the ass let fly a mighty kick with his hind hoof. Last of all, the cock woke and cried lustily, "Cock-a-doodle-doo!" 1 eye, 2 eyes, and 3 eyes. There was once a woman who had 3 daughters, the eldest of whom was called One Eye, because she had only 1 eye in the middle of her forehead, and the second, 2 eyes, because she had 2 eyes, like other folks, and the youngest, 3 eyes, because she had 3 eyes, and her third eye was also in the center of her forehead. However, as 2 eyes saw just as other human beings did, her sisters and her mother could not endure her. They said to her, "Thou with thy 2 eyes art no better than the common people. Thou dost not belong to us." They pushed her about and threw old clothes to her and gave her nothing to eat but what they left, and did everything that they could to make her unhappy. It came to pass that 2 eyes had to go out into the fields and tend the goat. But she was still quite hungry, because her sisters had given her so little to eat. So she sat down on a ridge and began to weep, and so bitterly that 2 streams ran down from her eyes. And once, when she looked up in her grief, a woman was standing beside her, who said, "Why art thou weeping, little 2 Eyes?" 2 Eyes answered, "Have I not reason to weep, when I have 2 eyes, like other people? And my sisters and mother hate me for it, and push me from one corner to another, throw old clothes at me, and give me nothing to eat but the scraps they leave. Today they have given me so little that I am still quite hungry." Then the wise woman said, "Wipe away thy tears, 2 Eyes, and I will tell thee something to stop thee ever suffering from hunger again. Just say to thy goat, 'Bleat, my little goat, bleat. Cover the table with something to eat.' And then a clean, well-spread little table will stand before thee, with the most delicious food upon it, of which thou mayest eat as much as thou art inclined for. And when thou hast had enough, and hast no more need of the little table, just say, 'Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray,' and take the table quite away, and then it will vanish again from thy sight." Hereupon the wise woman departed, but 2 Eyes thought, "I must instantly make a trial, and see if what she said is true, for I am far too hungry." And she said, "Bleat, my little goat, bleat. Cover the table with something to eat." and scarcely had she spoken the words than a little table, covered with a white cloth, was standing there, and on it was a plate with a knife and fork, and a silver spoon, and the most delicious food was there also, warm and smoking, as if it had just come out of the kitchen. Then Two Eyes said the shortest prayer she knew: "Lord God, be with us always. Amen," and helped herself to some food and enjoyed it. And when she was satisfied, she said, as the wise woman had taught her, "Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away." And immediately the little table and everything on it was gone again. "That is a delightful way of keeping house," thought Two Eyes, and was quite glad and happy in the evening when she went home with her goat. She found a small earthenware dish with some food, which her sisters had done ready for her, but she did not touch it. Next day, she again went out with her goat, and left the few bits of broken bread which had been handed to her lying untouched. The first and second time that she did this, her sisters did not remark it at all. But as it happened every time, they did observe it and said, "There is something wrong about Two Eyes. She always leaves her food untasted, and she used to eat up everything that was given her. She must have discovered other ways of getting food." In order that they might learn the truth, they resolved to send One Eye with Two Eyes when she went to drive her goat to the pasture, to observe what Two Eyes did when she was there, and whether anyone brought her anything to eat and drink. So when Two Eyes set out the next time, One Eye went to her and said, "I will go with you to the pasture and see that the goat is well taken care of and driven where there is food." But Two Eyes knew what was in One Eye's mind, and drove the goat into high grass and said, "Come, One Eye, we will sit down, and I will sing something to you." One Eye sat down and was tired with the unaccustomed walk and the heat of the sun. And Two Eyes sang constantly, "One Eye, wakest thou? One Eye, sleepest thou?" Until One Eye shut her one eye and fell asleep. And as soon as Two Eyes saw that One Eye was fast asleep and could discover nothing, she said, "Bleat, my little goat, bleat. Cover the table with something to eat," and seated herself at her table, and ate and drank until she was satisfied. And then she again cried, "Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away." And in an instant all was gone. Two Eyes now awakened One Eye and said, "One Eye, you want to take care of the goat, and go to sleep while you are doing it. And in the meantime, the goat might run all over the world. Come, let us go home again." So they went home, and again Two Eyes let her little dish stand untouched, and One Eye could not tell her mother why she would not eat it, and to excuse herself said, "I fell asleep when I was out." Next day, the mother said to Three Eyes, "This time thou shalt go and observe if Two Eyes eats anything when she is out, and if anyone fetches her food and drink, for she must eat and drink in secret." So Three Eyes went to Two Eyes and said, "I will go with you and see if the goat is taken proper care of and driven where there is food." But Two Eyes knew what was in Three Eyes' mind and drove the goat into high grass and said, "We will sit down and I will sing something to you, Three Eyes." Three Eyes sat down and was tired with the walk and with the heat of the sun. And Two Eyes began the same song as before and sang, "Three Eyes, are you waking?" But then, instead of singing, "Three Eyes, are you sleeping?" as she ought to have done, she thoughtlessly sang, "Two Eyes, are you sleeping?" and sang all the time, "Three Eyes, are you waking? Two Eyes, are you sleeping?" Then two of the eyes, which Three Eyes had, shut and fell asleep. But the third, as it had not been named in the song, did not sleep. It is true that Three Eyes shut it, but only in her cunning, to pretend it was asleep too. But it blinked, and could see everything very well, and when Two Eyes thought that Three Eyes was fast asleep, she used her little charm. "Bleat, my little goat, bleat. Cover the table with something to eat," and ate and drank as much as her heart desired, and then ordered the table to go away again. "Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away." And Three Eyes had seen everything. Then Two Eyes came to her, waked her, and said, "Have you been asleep, Three Eyes? You are a good caretaker. Come, we will go home." And when they got home, Two Eyes again did not eat. And Three Eyes said to the mother, "Now, I know why that high-minded thing there does not eat. When she is out, she says to the goat, 'Bleat, my little goat, bleat. Cover the table with something to eat.' And then a little table appears before her, covered with the best of food, much better than any we have here. And when she has eaten all she wants, she says, 'Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray,' and take the table quite away, and all disappears. I watched everything closely. She put two of my eyes to sleep by using a certain form of words, but luckily the one in my forehead kept awake. Then the envious mother cried, Dost thou want to fare better than we do? The desire shall pass away. And she fetched a butcher's knife and thrust it into the heart of the goat, which fell down dead. When Two Eyes saw that, she went out full of trouble, seated herself on the ridge of grass at the edge of the field, and wept bitter tears. Suddenly, the wise woman once more stood by her side and said, Two Eyes, why art thou weeping? Have I not reason to weep? She answered, The goat which covered the table for me every day when I spoke your charm has been killed by my mother. And now I shall again have to bear hunger and want. The wise woman said, Two Eyes, I will give thee a piece of good advice. Ask thy sisters to give thee the entrails of the slaughtered goat, and bury them in the ground in front of the house, and thy fortune will be made. Then she vanished, and Two Eyes went home and said to her sisters, Dear sisters, do give me some part of my goat. I don't wish for what is good, but give me the entrails. Then they laughed and said, If that's all you want, you can have it. So Two Eyes took the entrails and buried them quietly in the evening in front of the house door, as the wise woman had counseled her to do. Next morning, when they all awoke and went to the house door, there stood a strangely magnificent tree with leaves of silver and fruit of gold hanging among them, so that in all the wide world there was nothing more beautiful or precious. They did not know how the tree could have come there during the night, but Two Eyes saw that it had grown up out of the entrails of the goat, for it was standing on the exact spot where she had buried them. Then the mother said to One Eye, Climb up, my child, and gather some of the fruit of the tree for us. One Eye climbed up, but when she was about to get hold of one of the golden apples, the branch escaped from her hands. And that happened each time, so that she could not pluck a single apple, let her do what she might. Then said the mother, Three Eyes, do you climb up? You with your 3 eyes can look about you better than One Eye. One Eye slipped down, and 3 Eyes climbed up. 3 Eyes was not more skillful, and might search as she liked, but the golden apples always escaped her. At length, the mother grew impatient and climbed up herself, but could get hold of the fruit no better than One Eye and 3 Eyes, for she always clutched empty air. Then said 2 Eyes, I will just go up. Perhaps I may succeed better. The sisters cried, You indeed, with your 2 eyes, what can you do? But 2 Eyes climbed up, and the golden apples did get out of her way, but came into her hand of their own accord, so that she could pluck them one after the other, and brought a whole apronful down with her. The mother took them away from her, And instead of treating poor Two Eyes any better for this, she and One Eye and Three Eyes were only envious, because Two Eyes alone had been able to get the fruit, and they treated her still more cruelly. It so befell that once when they were all standing together by the tree, a young knight came up. "Quick, Two Eyes," cried the two sisters, "creep under this, and don't disgrace us." And with all speed they turned an empty barrel, which was standing close by the tree over poor Two Eyes, and they pushed the golden apples, which she had been gathering, under it too. When the knight came nearer, he was a handsome lord, who stopped and admired the magnificent gold and silver tree, and said to the two sisters, "To whom does this fine tree belong? Anyone who would bestow one branch of it on me might, in return for it, ask whatsoever he desired." Then One Eye and Three Eyes replied that the tree belonged to them, and that they would give him a branch. They both took great trouble, but they were not able to do it, for the branches and fruit both moved away from them every time. Then said the knight, "It is very strange that the tree should belong to you, and that you should still not be able to break a piece off." They again asserted that the tree was their property. Whilst they were saying so, Two Eyes rolled out a couple of golden apples from under the barrel to the feet of the knight, for she was vexed with One Eye and Three Eyes for not speaking the truth. When the knight saw the apples, he was astonished and asked where they came from. One Eye and Three Eyes answered that they had another sister who was not allowed to show herself, for she had only two eyes, like any common person. The knight, however, desired to see her, and cried, "Two Eyes, come forth." Then Two Eyes, quite comforted, came from beneath the barrel, and the knight was surprised at her great beauty, and said, "Thou, Two Eyes, canst certainly break off a branch from the tree for me." "Yes," replied Two Eyes, "that I certainly shall be able to do, for the tree belongs to me." And she climbed up, and with the greatest ease broke off a branch with beautiful silver leaves and golden fruit, and gave it to the knight. Then said the knight, "Two Eyes, what shall I give thee for it?" "Alas," answered Two Eyes, "I suffer from hunger and thirst, grief and want, from early morning till late night. If you would take me with you and deliver me from these things, I should be happy." So the knight lifted Two Eyes onto his horse and took her home with him to his father's castle. And there he gave her beautiful clothes and meat and drink to her heart's content. And as he loved her so much, he married her. And the wedding was solemnized with great rejoicing. When Two Eyes was thus carried away by the handsome knight, her two sisters grudged her good fortune in downright earnest. The wonderful tree, however, still remains with us, thought they. And even if we can gather no fruit from it, still everyone will stand still and look at it, and come to us and admire it. Who knows what good things may be in store for us? But next morning, the tree had vanished, and all their hopes were at an end. And when Two Eyes looked out of the window of her own little room, to her great delight, it was standing in front of it, and so it had followed her. Two Eyes lived a long time in happiness. Once, two poor women came to her in her castle and begged for alms. She looked in their faces and recognized her sisters, One Eye and Three Eyes, who had fallen into such poverty that they had to wander about and beg their bread from door to door. Two Eyes, however, made them welcome and was kind to them and took care of them, so that they both, with all their hearts, repented the evil that they had done their sister in their youth. The Devil with the 3 golden hairs. There was once a poor woman who gave birth to a little son, and as he came into the world with a call on, it was predicted that in his 14th year he would have the king's daughter for his wife. It happened that soon afterwards the king came into the village, and no one knew that he was the king. And when he asked the people what news there was, they answered, "A child has just been born with a call on. Whatever anyone so born undertakes turns out well." It is prophesied, too, that in his 14th year he will have the king's daughter for his wife. The king, who had a bad heart and was angry about the prophecy, went to the parents and, seeming quite friendly, said, "You poor people, let me have your child, and I will take care of it." At first they refused, but when the stranger offered them a large amount of gold for it, and they thought, "It is a luck child, and everything must turn out well for it," they at last consented and gave him the child. The king put it in a box and rode away with it until he came to a deep piece of water. Then he threw the box into it and thought, "I have freed my daughter from her unlooked-for suitor." The box, however, did not sink, but floated like a boat, and not a drop of water made its way into it. And it floated to within 2 miles of the king's chief city, where there was a mill. And it came to a standstill at the mill dam. A miller's boy, who by good luck was standing there, noticed it and pulled it out with a hook, thinking that he had found a great treasure. But when he opened it, there lay a pretty boy inside, quite fresh and lively. He took him to the miller and his wife, and as they had no children, they were glad, and said, "God has given him to us." They took great care of the foundling, and he grew up in all goodness. It happened that once in a storm, the king went into the mill, and he asked the mill folk if the tall youth was their son. "No," answered they. "He's a foundling. 14 years ago, he floated down to the mill dam in a box, and the mill boy pulled him out of the water." Then the king knew that it was none other than the luck child which he had thrown into the water. And he said, "My good people, could not the youth take a letter to the queen? I will give him 2 gold pieces as a reward." "Just as the king commands," answered they. And they told the boy to hold himself in readiness. Then the king wrote a letter to the queen, wherein he said, "As soon as the boy arrives with this letter, let him be killed and buried, and all must be done before I come home." The boy set out with this letter, but he lost his way, and in the evening came to a large forest. In the darkness, he saw a small light. He went towards it and reached a cottage. When he went in, an old woman was sitting by the fire, quite alone. She started when she saw the boy and said, "Whence do you come, and whither are you going?" "I come from the mill," he answered, "and wish to go to the queen, to whom I am taking a letter. But as I have lost my way in the forest, I should like to stay here overnight." "You poor boy," said the woman. "You have come into a den of thieves, and when they come home, they will kill you." "Let them come," said the boy. "I am not afraid, but I am so tired that I cannot go any farther." And he stretched himself upon a bench and fell asleep. Soon afterwards, the robbers came and angrily asked what strange boy was lying there. "Ah," said the old woman, "it is an innocent child who has lost himself in the forest, and out of pity I have let him come in. He has to take a letter to the queen." No. The robbers opened the letter and read it, and in it was written that the boy, as soon as he arrived, should be put to death. Then the hard-hearted robbers felt pity, and their leader tore up the letter and wrote another, saying that as soon as the boy came, he should be married at once to the king's daughter. Then they let him lie quietly on the bench until the next morning. And when he awoke, they gave him the letter and showed him the right way. And the queen, when she had received the letter and read it, did as was written in it, and had a splendid wedding feast prepared. And the king's daughter was married to the luck child. And as the youth was handsome and agreeable, she lived with him in joy and contentment. After some time, the king returned to his palace and saw that the prophecy was fulfilled, and the luck child married to his daughter. "How has that come to pass?" said he. "I gave quite another order in my letter." So the queen gave him the letter, and said that he might see for himself what was written in it. The king read the letter, and saw quite well that it had been exchanged for the other. He asked the youth what had become of the letter entrusted to him. and why he had brought another instead of it. "I know nothing about it," answered he. "It must have been changed in the night, when I slept in the forest." The king said in a passion, "You shall not have everything quite so much your own way. Whosoever marries my daughter must fetch me from hell 3 golden hairs from the head of the devil. Bring me what I want, and you shall keep my daughter." In this way, the king hoped to be rid of him forever. But the luck child answered, "I will fetch the golden hairs. I am not afraid of the devil." Thereupon, he took leave of them and began his journey. The road led him to a large town, where the watchman by the gates asked him what his trade was and what he knew. "I know everything," answered the luck child. "Then you can do us a favor," said the watchman, "if you will tell us why our market fountain, which once flowed with wine, has become dry and no longer gives even water." "That you shall know," answered he. "Only wait until I come back." Then he went farther and came to another town, and there also the gatekeeper asked him what was his trade and what he knew. "I know everything," answered he. "Then you can do us a favor and tell us why a tree in our town, which once bore golden apples, now does not even put forth leaves." "You shall know that," answered he. "Only wait until I come back." Then he went on and came to a wide river over which he must go. The ferryman asked him what his trade was and what he knew. "I know everything," answered he. "Then you can do me a favor," said the ferryman, "and tell me why I must always be rowing backwards and forwards, and am never set free." "You shall know that," answered he. "Only wait until I come back." When he had crossed the water, he found the entrance to hell. It was black and sooty within, and the devil was not at home, but his grandmother was sitting in a large armchair. "What do you want?" said she to him, but she did not look so very wicked. "I should like to have 3 golden hairs from the devil's head," answered he. "Else I cannot keep my wife." "That is a good deal to ask for," said she. "If the devil comes home and finds you, it will cost you your life. But as I pity you, I will see if I cannot help you." She changed him into an ant and said, "Creep into the folds of my dress. You will be safe there." "Yes," answered he. "So far, so good. But there are 3 things besides that I want to know. Why a fountain which once flowed with wine has become dry and no longer gives even water. Why a tree which once bore golden apples does not even put forth leaves. And why a ferryman must always be going backwards and forwards and is never set free." "Those are difficult questions," answered she, "but only be silent and quiet and pay attention to what the devil says when I pull out the 3 golden hairs." As the evening came on, the devil returned home. No sooner had he entered than he noticed that the air was not pure. "I smell man's flesh," said he. "All is not right here." Then he pried into every corner and searched, but could not find anything. His grandmother scolded him. "It has just been swept," said she, "and everything put in order, and now you are upsetting it again. You have always got man's flesh in your nose. Sit down and eat your supper." When he had eaten and drunk, he was tired, and laid his head in his grandmother's lap, and before long he was fast asleep, snoring and breathing heavily. Then the old woman took hold of a golden hair, pulled it out, and laid it down near her. "Oh," cried the devil, "what are you doing?" "I have had a bad dream," answered the grandmother, "so I seized hold of your hair." "What did you dream then?" said the devil. "I dreamed that a fountain in a marketplace from which wine once flowed was dried up, and not even water would flow out of it. What is the cause of it?" Oh, if they did but know it," answered the devil. "There is a toad sitting under a stone in the well. If they killed it, the wine would flow again." He went to sleep again and snored until the windows shook. Then she pulled the second hair out. "Ha! What are you doing?" cried the devil angrily. "Do not take it ill," said she. "I did it in a dream." "What have you dreamt this time?" asked he. "I dreamt that in a certain kingdom there stood an apple tree which had once borne golden apples, but now would not even bear leaves. What, think you, was the reason?" "Oh, if they did but know," answered the devil. "A mouse is gnawing at the root. If they killed this, they would have golden apples again. But if it gnaws much longer, the tree will wither altogether. But leave me alone with your dreams. If you disturb me in my sleep again, you will get a box on the ear." The grandmother spoke gently to him until he fell asleep again and snored. Then she took hold of the third golden hair and pulled it out. The devil jumped up, roared out, and would have treated her ill if she had not quieted him once more and said, "Who can help bad dreams?" "What was the dream then?" asked he, and was quite curious. "I dreamt of a ferryman who complained that he must always ferry from one side to the other, and was never released. What is the cause of it?" "Ah, the fool," answered the devil. "When anyone comes and wants to go across, he must put the oar in his hand, and the other man will have to ferry, and he will be free." As the grandmother had plucked out the 3 golden hairs, and the 3 questions were answered, she let the old serpent alone, and he slept until daybreak. When the devil had gone out again, the old woman took the ant out of the folds of her dress and gave the luck child his human shape again. "There are the 3 golden hairs for you," said she. "What the devil said to your 3 questions, I suppose you heard?" "Yes," answered he, "I heard, and will take care to remember." "You have what you want," said she, "and now you can go your way." He thanked the old woman for helping him in his need, and left Hell well content that everything had turned out so fortunately. When he came to the ferryman, he was expected to give the promised answer. "Ferry me across first," said the luck child, "and then I will tell you how you can be set free." And when he reached the opposite shore, he gave him the devil's advice. "Next time anyone comes who wants to be ferried over, just put the oar in his hand." He went on and came to the town wherein stood the unfruitful tree, and there too the watchman wanted an answer. So he told him what he had heard from the devil. "Kill the mouse which is gnawing at its root, and it will again bear golden apples." Then the watchman thanked him and gave him as a reward 2 asses laden with gold, which followed him. At last he came to the town whose well was dry. He told the watchman what the devil had said. "A toad is in the well beneath a stone. You must find it and kill it, and the well will again give wine in plenty." The watchman thanked him, and also gave him 2 asses laden with gold. At last the luck child got home to his wife, who was heartily glad to see him again, and to hear how well he had prospered in everything. To the king he took what he had asked for, the devil's 3 golden hairs. And when the king saw the 4 asses laden with gold, he was quite content, and said, "Now all the conditions are fulfilled, and you can keep my daughter. But tell me, dear son-in-law, where did all that gold come from? This is tremendous wealth." "I was rowed across a river," answered he, "and got it there. It lies on the shore instead of sand." "Can I too fetch some of it?" said the king, and he was quite eager about it. "As much as you like," answered he. "There is a ferryman on the river. Let him ferry you over, and you can fill your sacks on the other side." The greedy king set out in all haste, and when he came to the river, he beckoned to the ferryman to put him across. The ferryman came and bade him get in, and when they got to the other shore, he put the oar in his hand and sprang out. But from this time forth, the king had to ferry as a punishment for his sins. Perhaps he is ferrying still? If he is, it is because no one has taken the oar from him. The Queen Bee. Once upon a time, there were 3 sons of a mighty king. The 2 eldest, filled with restless pride and a thirst for adventure, wandered far from their father's halls. But they soon strayed into folly, for they took to wild living, wasting their days in idleness, their nights in reckless company. and they gave up all thought of ever returning home. The youngest son, however, was of another sort. He was small of stature, plain of face, and slow of speech. Because of this, he was called by all Whitling, as though he were the simpleton of the family. Yet his heart was kind, and his spirit steadfast. When he saw that his brothers did not return, he resolved to set out and find them, though none expected him to succeed. After long wandering, Whitling came at last upon his brothers. They mocked him at once, laughing at his simplicity. "Why, foolish boy," they jeered. "Did you think you could make your way in the world when we, who are cleverer and stronger, have failed?" But Whitling only smiled and said little, and so the three went on together. Not long had they traveled when they came upon an ant hill. The two elder brothers, mischievous and cruel at heart, wished to scatter it with their sticks, so that they might watch the little ants run hither and thither in terror, carrying away their white eggs. But Whitling stepped before them and cried, "Let the little creatures be. They do you no harm. I will not suffer them to be disturbed." And so the ants were spared. Farther along, they reached a broad, still lake, its surface glittering with sunlight, upon which swam many ducks. The elder brothers licked their lips and said, "We will catch 2 of them, roast them over the fire, and eat our fill." But Whitling forbade it. "Leave the poor creatures in peace," said he. "I will not suffer them to be killed." And so the ducks continued to glide unharmed across the water. At length, they came into a wood, and there, in the hollow of a tree, was a great bee's nest, heavy with honey that overflowed and ran down the bark in golden rivulets. The elder brothers wished to build a fire at the foot of the tree, that the smoke might stifle the bees, and then they could feast on the honey. But again, Whitling stayed their hands. "Do not destroy them," he said firmly. "I will not suffer them to be smothered." So the bees hummed safely in their hive. After many days, the brothers came to a castle, vast and silent, with stables filled with horses that stood frozen, each one of stone. They wandered through chamber after chamber, and at last came to a heavy door with 3 locks. In the middle was a small opening through which they peered, and saw within an old, gray-haired man seated at a table. They called to him once, twice, and thrice before he rose, unlocked the door, and came forth without a word. He led them silently to a hall, where a table stood laden with every good thing to eat and drink. When they had satisfied their hunger, he showed to each his chamber and bade them rest. On the following morning, the gray man led the eldest brother to a stone table, upon which was written the means by which the castle might be freed from enchantment. 3 tasks there were. The first task. In the moss of the forest lay hidden 1,000 pearls belonging to the princess, and they must be gathered before the sun set. If even 1 pearl were missing, he who undertook the task would be turned into stone. The eldest set out boldly, but though he searched until his hands bled, he found only 100. When the sun sank, the prophecy was fulfilled, and he stood frozen, a statue of stone. The second task. On the morrow, the second brother attempted the same trial. All day he toiled, overturning moss and stone, and he gathered 200 pearls. But at dusk, he too was transformed into lifeless stone. The third task. At last, it was Whitling's turn. He searched with trembling hands, but the pearls were small and many, and soon despair overcame him. He sat upon a rock and wept bitterly. But then, from the shadows, came the Ant King with 5,000 of his followers, the very ants whom Whitling had spared. Swiftly, they scurried through the moss, and before the sun had set, the 1,000 pearls lay gathered in a shining heap. The second trial. Now the gray man pointed to the second writing upon the stone. The key to the princess's chamber lay sunk deep in the lake, and it must be fetched forth. Whitling went to the water's edge, and lo, the ducks whose lives he had spared came swimming toward him. They dipped and dived, and soon brought up the key, gleaming from the depths. The final trial, the last and most perilous test, was set before him. He must choose from among 3 sleeping maidens the youngest and loveliest princess, yet they were alike as 3 drops of water, each the mirror of the others, and none could tell them apart. Only this was known. Before slumber, each had eaten a different sweet, sugar, syrup, or honey. Whitling's heart quailed, for to choose wrongly was to fail. But then the air hummed, and the queen of the bees, whom Whitling had saved from the fire, flew down. She alighted upon the lips of the maiden who had tasted honey, and there she remained. Thus Whitling knew his choice. In that instant, the enchantment was broken. The stone figures stirred and breathed. The horses stamped their hooves, and the princesses awoke. Joy rang through the halls. The youngest princess, fairest of all, became Whitling's bride. And when her father, the king, passed away, Whitling wore the crown. As for the elder brothers, they were not left empty-handed. They were wed to the 2 elder princesses, but they were forced to live forever in the shadow of their younger brother, whom they had once mocked as a fool. And so it was that kindness, not cunning, won the kingdom. All kinds of fur. Allerleirauh. There was once, on a time, a king who had a wife with golden hair, and she was so beautiful that her equal was not to be found on earth. It came to pass that she lay ill, and as she felt that she must soon die, she called the king and said, "If thou wishest to marry again after my death, take no one who is not quite as beautiful as I am, and who has not just such golden hair as I have. This thou must promise me." And after the king had promised her this, she closed her eyes and died. For a long time the king could not be comforted, and had no thought of taking another wife. At length his counselors said, "There is no help for it. The king must marry again, that we may have a queen." And now messengers were sent about far and wide to seek a bride who equaled the late queen in beauty. In the whole world, however, none was to be found. And even if one had been found, still there would have been no one who had such golden hair. So the messengers came home as they went. Now the king had a daughter who was just as beautiful as her dead mother, and had the same golden hair. When she was grown up, the king looked at her one day and saw that in every respect she was like his late wife, and suddenly felt a violent love for her. Then he spake to his counselors, "I will marry my daughter, for she is the counterpart of my late wife. Otherwise, I can find no bride who resembles her." When the counselors heard that, they were shocked and said, "God has forbidden a father to marry his daughter. No good can come from such a crime, and the kingdom will be involved in the ruin." The daughter was still more shocked when she became aware of her father's resolution, but hoped to turn him from his design. Then she said to him, "Before I fulfill your wish, I must have 3 dresses, one as golden as the sun, one as silvery as the moon, and one as bright as the stars. Besides this, I wish for a mantle of 1,000 different kinds of fur and hair joined together, and one of every kind of animal in your kingdom must give a piece of his skin for it." But she thought, "To get that will be quite impossible, and thus I shall divert my father from his wicked intentions." The king, however, did not give it up, and the cleverest maidens in his kingdom had to weave the 3 dresses, one as golden as the sun, one as silvery as the moon, and one as bright as the stars. And his huntsman had to catch one of every kind of animal in the whole of his kingdom, and take from it a piece of its skin. And out of these was made a mantle of 1,000 different kinds of fur. At length, when all was ready, the king caused the mantle to be brought, spread it out before her, and said, "The wedding shall be tomorrow." When, therefore, the king's daughter saw that there was no longer any hope of turning her father's heart, she resolved to run away from him. In the night, whilst everyone was asleep, she got up and took 3 different things from her treasures: a golden ring, a golden spinning wheel, and a golden reel. The 3 dresses of the sun, moon, and stars she put into a nutshell, put on her mantle of all kinds of fur, and blackened her face and hands with soot. Then she commended herself to God, and went away, and walked the whole night until she reached a great forest. And as she was tired, she got into a hollow tree and fell asleep. The sun rose, and she slept on, and she was still sleeping when it was full day. Then it so happened that the king to whom this forest belonged was hunting in it. When his dogs came to the tree, they sniffed and ran barking round about it. The king said to the huntsman, "Just see what kind of wild beast has hidden itself in there." The huntsman obeyed his order, and when they came back, they said, "A wondrous beast is lying in the hollow tree. We have never before seen one like it. Its skin is fur of 1,000 different kinds, but it is lying asleep." Said the king, "See if you can catch it alive, and then fasten it to the carriage, and we will take it with us." When the huntsman laid hold of the maiden, she awoke full of terror, and cried to them, "I am a poor child, deserted by father and mother. Have pity on me, and take me with you." Then said they, "Allerleirauh, thou wilt be useful in the kitchen. Come with us, and thou canst sweep up the ashes." So they put her in the carriage and took her home to the royal palace. There they pointed out to her a closet under the stairs, where no daylight entered, and said, "Hairy animal, there canst thou live and sleep." Then she was sent into the kitchen, and there she carried wood and water, swept the hearth, plucked the fowls, picked the vegetables, raked the ashes, and did all the dirty work. Allerleirauh lived there for a long time in great wretchedness. Alas, fair princess, what is to become of thee now? It happened, however, that one day a feast was held in the palace, and she said to the cook, "May I go upstairs for a while and look on? I will place myself outside the door." The cook answered, "Yes, go, but you must be back here in half an hour to sweep the hearth." Then she took her oil lamp, went into her den, put off her fur dress, and washed the soot off her face and hands, so that her full beauty once more came to light. And she opened the nut and took out her dress, which shone like the sun. And when she had done that, she went up to the festival, and everyone made way for her, for no one knew her. and thought no otherwise than that she was a king's daughter. The king came to meet her, gave his hand to her, and danced with her, and thought in his heart, "My eyes have never yet seen anyone so beautiful." When the dance was over, she curtsied, and when the king looked round again, she had vanished, and none knew whither. The guards who stood outside the palace were called and questioned, but no one had seen her. She had, however, run into her little den, had quickly taken off her dress, made her face and hands black again, put on the fur mantle, and again was Allerleirauh. And now, when she went into the kitchen and was about to get to her work and sweep up the ashes, the cook said, "Leave that alone till morning, and make me the soup for the king. I, too, will go upstairs a while and take a look, but let no hairs fall in, or in future thou shalt have nothing to eat." So the cook went away, and Allerleirauh made the soup for the king, and made bread soup, and the best she could. And when it was ready, she fetched her golden ring from her little den, and put it in the bowl in which the soup was served. When the dancing was over, the king had his soup brought, and ate it, and he liked it so much that it seemed to him he had never tasted better. But when he came to the bottom of the bowl, he saw a golden ring lying, and could not conceive how it could have got there. Then he ordered the cook to appear before him. The cook was terrified when he heard the order, and said to Allerleirauh, "Thou hast certainly let a hair fall into the soup, and if thou hast, thou shalt be beaten for it." When he came before the king, the latter asked who had made the soup. The cook replied, "I made it." But the king said, "That is not true, for it was much better than usual, and cooked differently." He answered, "I must acknowledge that I did not make it. It was made by the rough animal." The king said, "Go and bid it come up here." When Allerleirauh came, the king said, "Who art thou?" "I am a poor girl who no longer has any father or mother." He asked further, "Of what use art thou in my palace?" She answered, "I am good for nothing but to have boots thrown at my head." He continued, "Where didst thou get the ring which was in the soup?" She answered, "I know nothing about the ring." So the king could learn nothing, and had to send her away again. After a while, there was another festival, and then, as before, Allerleirauh begged the cook for leave to go and look on. He answered, "Yes, but come back again in half an hour, and make the king the bread soup which he so much likes." Then she ran into her den, washed herself quickly, and took out of the nut the dress which was as silvery as the moon, and put it on. Then she went up, and was like a princess, and the king stepped forward to meet her, and rejoiced to see her once more. And as the dance was just beginning, they danced it together. But when it was ended, she again disappeared so quickly that the king could not observe where she went. She, however, sprang into her den and once more made herself a hairy animal and went into the kitchen to prepare the bread soup. When the cook had gone upstairs, she fetched the little golden spinning wheel and put it in the bowl so that the soup covered it. Then it was taken to the king, who ate it and liked it as much as before, and had the cook brought, who this time likewise was forced to confess that Allerleirauh had prepared the soup. Allerleirauh again came before the king, but she answered that she was good for nothing else but to have boots thrown at her head, and that she knew nothing at all about the little golden spinning wheel. When, for the third time, the king held a festival, all happened just as it had done before. The cook said, "Faith, rough skin, thou art a witch, and always puttest something in the soup which makes it so good that the king likes it better than that which I cook." But as she begged so hard, he let her go up at the appointed time. And now she put on the dress which shone like the stars, and thus entered the hall. Again the king danced with the beautiful maiden, and thought that she never yet had been so beautiful. And whilst she was dancing, he contrived, without her noticing it, to slip a golden ring on her finger. And he had given orders that the dance should last a very long time. When it was ended, he wanted to hold her fast by her hands, but she tore herself loose and sprang away so quickly through the crowd that she vanished from his sight. She ran as fast as she could into her den beneath the stairs. But as she had been too long and had stayed more than half an hour, she could not take off her pretty dress, but only threw over it her fur mantle. And in her haste, she did not make herself quite black, but one finger remained white. Then Allerleirauh ran into the kitchen and cooked the bread soup for the king, and as the cook was away, put her golden reel into it. When the king found the reel at the bottom of it, he caused Allerleirauh to be summoned. And then he espied the white finger, and saw the ring which he had put on it during the dance. Then he grasped her by the hand and held her fast, and when she wanted to release herself and run away, her mantle of fur opened a little, and the star dress shone forth. The king clutched the mantle and tore it off. Then her golden hair shone forth, and she stood there in full splendor, and could no longer hide herself. And when she had washed the soot and ashes from her face, she was more beautiful than anyone who had ever been seen on earth. But the king said, "Thou art my dear bride, and we will never more part from each other." Thereupon the marriage was solemnized, and they lived happily until their death. The brother and sister. The brother took his sister's hand and said to her, Since our mother died, we have had no good days. Our stepmother beats us every day, and if we go near her, she kicks us away. We have nothing to eat but hard crusts of bread left over. The dog under the table fares better. He gets a good piece every now and then. If our mother only knew how she would pity us. Come, let us go together out into the wide world. So they went, and journeyed the whole day through fields and meadows and stony places. And if it rained, the sister said, the skies, and we are weeping together. In the evening, they came to a great wood, and they were so weary with hunger and their long journey that they climbed up into a high tree and fell asleep. The next morning, when they awoke, the sun was high in heaven and shone brightly through the leaves. Then said the brother, Sister, I am thirsty. If I only knew where to find a brook, that I might go and drink. I almost think that I hear one rushing. So the brother got down and led his sister by the hand, and they went to seek the brook. But their wicked stepmother was a witch, and had known quite well that the two children had run away, and had sneaked after them, as only witches can, and had laid a spell on all the brooks in the forest. So when they found a little stream flowing smoothly over its pebbles, the brother was going to drink of it. But the sister heard how it said in its rushing, He a tiger will be who drinks of me. Who drinks of me, a tiger will be. Then the sister cried, Pray, dear brother, do not drink, or you will become a wild beast, and will tear me in pieces. So the brother refrained from drinking, though his thirst was great, and he said he would wait till he came to the next brook. When they came to a second brook, the sister heard it say, He a wolf will be who drinks of me. Who drinks of me, a wolf will be. Then the sister cried, Pray, dear brother, do not drink, or you will be turned into a wolf, and will eat me up. So the brother refrained from drinking, and said, I will wait until we come to the next brook, and then I must drink. Whatever you say, my thirst is so great. And when they came to the third brook, the sister heard how in its rushing it said, Who drinks of me, a fawn will be. He a fawn will be, who drinks of me. Then the sister said, O my brother, I pray drink not, or you will be turned into a fawn, and run away far from me. But he had already kneeled by the side of the brook, and stooped, and drunk of the water. And as the first drops passed his lips, he became a fawn. And the sister wept over her poor lost brother. And the fawn wept also, and stayed sadly beside her. At last the maiden said, Be comforted, dear fawn. Indeed, I will never leave you. Then she untied her golden girdle and bound it round the fawn's neck, and went and gathered rushes to make a soft cord, which she fastened to him. And then she led him on, and they went deeper into the forest. And when they had gone a long, long way, they came at last to a little house, and the maiden looked inside, and as it was empty, she thought, "We might as well live here." And she fetched leaves and moss to make a soft bed for the fawn. And every morning she went out and gathered roots and berries and nuts for herself, and fresh grass for the fawn, who ate out of her hand with joy, frolicking round her. At night, when the sister was tired and had said her prayers, she laid her head on the fawn's back, which served her for a pillow, and softly fell asleep. And if only the brother could have got back his own shape again, it would have been a charming life. So they lived a long while in the wilderness alone. Now it happened that the king of that country held a great hunt in the forest. The blowing of the horns, the barking of the dogs, and the lusty shouts of the huntsmen sounded through the wood, and the fawn heard them, and was eager to be among them. "Oh," said he to his sister, "do let me go to the hunt. I cannot stay behind any longer," and begged so long that at last she consented. "But mind," said she to him, "come back to me at night. I must lock my door against the wild hunters. So, in order that I may know you, you must knock and say, 'Little sister, let me in.' And unless I hear that I shall not unlock the door." Then the fawn sprang out and felt glad and merry in the open air. The king and his huntsmen saw the beautiful animal and began at once to pursue him. But they could not come within reach of him, for when they thought they were certain of him, he sprang away over the bushes and disappeared. As soon as it was dark, he went back to the little house, knocked at the door, and said, "Little sister, let me in." Then the door was opened to him, and he went in and rested the whole night long on his soft bed. The next morning, the hunt began anew, and when the fawn heard the hunting horns and the tally-ho of the huntsmen, he could rest no longer, and said, "Little sister, let me out. I must go." The sister opened the door and said, "Now, mind you must come back at night and say the same words." When the king and his hunters saw the fawn with the golden collar again, they chased him closely, but he was too nimble and swift for them. This lasted the whole day, and at last the hunters surrounded him, and one of them wounded his foot a little, so that he was obliged to limp and to go slowly. Then a hunter slipped after him to the little house, and heard how he called out, "Little sister, let me in." and saw the door open and shut again after him directly. Vissa, the hunter, noticed all this carefully, went to the king, and told him all he had seen and heard. Then said the king, "Tomorrow we will hunt again." But the sister was very terrified when she saw that her fawn was wounded. She washed his foot, laid cooling leaves round it, and said, "Lie down on your bed, dear fawn, and rest, that you may be soon well." The wound was very slight, so that the fawn felt nothing of it the next morning. And when he heard the noise of the hunting outside, he said, "I cannot stay in. I must go after them. I shall not be taken easily again." The sister began to weep and said, "I know you will be killed, and I left alone here in the forest and forsaken of everybody. I cannot let you go. Then I shall die here with longing," answered the fawn. "When I hear the sound of the horn, I feel as if I should leap out of my skin." Then the sister, seeing there was no help for it, unlocked the door with a heavy heart, and the fawn bounded away into the forest, well and merry. When the king saw him, he said to his hunters, "Now follow him up all day long till the night comes, and see that you do him no hurt." So as soon as the sun had gone down, the king said to the huntsman, "Now come and show me the little house in the wood." And when he got to the door, he knocked at it and cried, "Little sister, let me in." Then the door opened, and the king went in, and there stood a maiden, more beautiful than any he had seen before. The maiden shrieked out when she saw, instead of the fawn, a man standing there with a gold crown on his head. But the king looked kindly on her, took her by the hand, and said, "Will you go with me to my castle and be my dear wife?" "Oh yes," answered the maiden, "but the fawn must come too. I could not leave him." And the king said, "He shall remain with you as long as you live, and shall lack nothing." Then the fawn came bounding in, and the sister tied the cord of rushes to him, and led him by her own hand out of the little house. The king put the beautiful maiden on his horse and carried her to his castle, where the wedding was held with great pomp. So she became Lady Queen, and they lived together happily for a long while. The fawn was well tended and cherished, and he gamboled about the castle garden. Now the wicked stepmother, whose fault it was that the children were driven out into the world, never dreamed but that the sister had been eaten up by wild beasts in the forest, and that the brother, in the likeness of a fawn, had been slain by the hunters. But when she heard that they were so happy, and that things had gone so well with them, jealousy and envy arose in her heart, and left her no peace. and her chief thought was how to bring misfortune upon them. Her own daughter, who was as ugly as sin and had only one eye, complained to her and said, "I never had the chance of being a queen." "Never mind," said the old woman to satisfy her. "When the time comes, I shall be at hand." After a while, the queen brought a beautiful baby boy into the world, and that day the king was out hunting. The old witch took the shape of the bedchamber woman and went into the room where the queen lay, and said to her, "Come, the bath is ready. It will give you refreshment and new strength. Quick, or it will be cold." Her daughter was within call, so they carried the sick queen into the bathroom and left her there. And in the bathroom, they had made a great fire so as to suffocate the beautiful young queen. When that was managed, the old woman took her daughter, put a cap on her, and laid her in the bed in the queen's place, gave her also the queen's form and countenance, only she could not restore the lost eye. So, in order that the king might not remark it, she had to lie on the side where there was no eye. In the evening, when the king came home and heard that a little son was born to him, he rejoiced with all his heart, and was going at once to his dear wife's bedside to see how she did. Then the old woman cried hastily, "For your life, do not draw back the curtains to let in the light upon her. She must be kept quiet." So the king went away, and never knew that a false queen was lying in the bed. Now, when it was midnight, and everyone was asleep, the nurse, who was sitting by the cradle in the nursery and watching there alone, saw the door open and the true queen come in. She took the child out of the cradle, laid it in her bosom, and fed it. Then she shook out its little pillow, put the child back again, and covered it with the coverlet. She did not forget the fawn either. She went to him where he lay in the corner and stroked his back tenderly. Then she went in perfect silence out at the door, and the nurse next morning asked the watchman if anyone had entered the castle during the night. But they said they had seen no one, and the queen came many nights and never said a word. The nurse saw her always, but she did not dare speak of it to anyone. After some time had gone by in this manner, the queen seemed to find voice, and said one night, "My child, my fawn, twice more I come to see, twice more I come, and then the end must be." The nurse said nothing, but as soon as the queen had disappeared, she went to the king and told him all. The king said, "Ah, heaven, what do I hear? I will myself watch by the child tomorrow night." So at evening he went into the nursery, and at midnight the queen appeared and said, "My child, my fawn, once more I come to see, once more I come, and then the end must be." And she tended the child as she was accustomed to do, before she vanished. The king dared not speak to her, but he watched again the following night and heard her say, "My child, my fawn, this once I come to see. This once I come, and now the end must be." Then the king could contain himself no longer, but rushed towards her, saying, "You are no other than my dear wife." Then she answered, "Yes, I am your dear wife." And in that moment, by the grace of heaven, her life returned to her, and she was once more well and strong. Then she told the king the snare that the wicked witch and her daughter had laid for her. The king had them both brought to judgment, and sentence was passed upon them. The daughter was sent away into the wood, where she was devoured by the wild beasts, and the witch was burned, and ended miserably. And as soon as her body was in ashes, the spell was removed from the fawn, and he took human shape again. And then the sister and brother lived happily together until the end. The Six Swans. Once, in the days when forests stretched short and wild, a king rode forth to hunt. He spurred his steed with such eagerness after a fierce creature of the woods that he outran every huntsman and servant who had followed him. Alone he thundered through thicket and hollow, heedless of time, until the sun sank low and shadows spread long. Then at last he reined in his horse and looked about him, and his heart grew heavy, for no path nor trace of mankind could he find. Only dark trees stood thick on every side, and silence deepened as the night crept close. The king dismounted and wandered, searching for any track that might lead him out. But none appeared, and while he stood uncertain, there tottered toward him an old woman, bent and wrinkled, with head ever nodding, as if sleep and wakefulness wrestled within her. Her eyes glimmered with a strange fire. It was no ordinary crone, but a witch. "My good mother," said the king, striving for courtesy, "can you show me the way out of this endless wood?" "Oh yes, my lord king," croaked she, "I can indeed. But mark this, I set a condition, and if you will not grant it, never shall you leave this place alive. Here you shall waste away until hunger gnaws you to death." The king, weary and desperate, asked, "And what is this condition?" "I have a daughter," said the hag, "a maiden fairer than any beneath the sky. If you will take her for your bride and make her queen, then I shall guide you forth." Pressed by peril, the king yielded, though his heart misgave him. So the old woman led him to her crooked hut, and there by the fire sat her daughter. The maiden was indeed wondrous to behold, with hair like golden silk and skin pale as milk. Yet though her beauty dazzled, it chilled him too, for her glance was cold and her smile uncanny. Still, he set her before him on his steed, and the witch showed him the path. By dawn, he returned safely to his royal castle, and not long after the wedding was held. Now, this king had been wed before, and by his first queen he had 7 children, 6 sons, and 1 dear daughter. Them he loved beyond all else in the world. But he feared that their stepmother, sprung from a witch's brood, might work them ill. So he resolved to hide them from her malice. He brought them to a secret castle deep in another forest, so remote that no living soul could find it save by magic. Only he could reach it, for a wise woman had once given him a wondrous clue of yarn. When cast upon the ground, it unrolled itself, showing the way unfailingly. Thus, the king often rode to see his children, and his heart rejoiced in their company. Yet the new queen, perceiving his many absences, grew suspicious and wrathful. She pressed the servants with gold until they betrayed the secret, and she learned of the clue of yarn. Once she had stolen it, she wrought 6 little shirts of snow-white silk, each sewn with enchantments, for her mother had taught her witchcraft. When next the king rode to hunt, she seized the yarn, followed its path into the forest, and came upon the hidden castle. The children, seeing a rider approach, thought it their beloved father, and they rushed forth joyously. But the wicked queen flung her cursed shirts over them, one by one, and in the twinkling of an eye, each child was changed into a swan, white-feathered, and crying with wild voices. They rose with beating wings and vanished into the sky. Only the little sister had not run forth, and so she alone remained. When the king returned, he found no sons, but only his daughter, sorrowful and alone. She told him how her brothers had flown away in swan's guise, and showed him the feathers that had fallen in the courtyard. His grief was deep, but he never dreamed that his queen had done the deed. Fearing lest his daughter too should be taken, he would have borne her away. Yet she begged to remain one more night, and in secret she resolved, "I will seek my brothers, though it cost me life itself." So at nightfall, she fled into the forest. Long she wandered, day after day, until her strength was nearly gone. At last she came upon a rough hut with 6 little beds. She dared not lie upon them, but crept beneath one to rest. At sunset, a great beating of wings was heard, and 6 swans flew in through the window. They shook themselves and blew upon one another until their white feathers fell away. Then they cast off their swan skins as if they were shirts. The maiden knew them at once and sprang forth with tears of joy. They too rejoiced at her coming, but sorrow soon followed, for they told her that each day they must live as swans, and only at evening, for 1/4 of an hour, might they be human again. She asked, "Can you not be delivered?" They answered, "Yes, but the task is hard beyond measure. For 6 years you must neither speak nor laugh. In that time you must sew for each of us a little shirt woven of star flowers. If you utter but a single word before all is finished, all will be lost." Even as they spoke, the short time was ended, and again they became swans and flew away. The maiden's heart was steadfast. She climbed a tree deep in the forest and set herself to the work. Day by day, she gathered star flowers, and day by day she sewed, silent as the grave. Now it befell that the king of that land was hunting in the wood, and his huntsmen spied her in the branches. They called to her, but she answered not. They begged her to descend, and when she would not, they plundered the trinkets from her body until naught remained but her smock. At last they dragged her down and brought her before their king. Though she spoke no word, her beauty and gentle bearing so moved him that he placed his mantle about her, set her before him on his horse, and carried her home. There he clothed her richly, and her modesty pleased him. Within days he said, "This maiden shall be my bride, for no other could I love." And he wedded her. But the new queen's mother-in-law was wicked at heart. She despised her silent daughter-in-law and whispered slanders. When the first child was born, she stole it away by night and smeared the young queen's lips with blood, crying that she was a devourer of flesh. Twice more the same she did with the second and third child. The king would not believe her, for his heart knew the queen's goodness. Yet when the third time came, the lords of the land demanded judgment, and she was sentenced to be burned as a witch. Now mark the wonder. The very day appointed for her death was the last of the 6 years. She had sewn all 6 shirts, save one, which lacked the left sleeve. As she was led forth, she bore the shirts upon her arm. When the fire was kindled, and the flames leapt high, behold, 6 swans came rushing through the air. She cast the shirts upon them, and at once their swan skins fell away. Her brothers stood before her in their own true form, save the youngest, who still bore a swan's wing in place of his arm, because the last shirt was unfinished. Then, at last, the maiden found her voice and cried aloud, "Now may I speak. Innocent have I been, falsely accused. "These are my brothers, whom I have delivered." She told all that had passed, and the children who had been stolen were brought forth from hiding. Great joy filled the court, and the wicked old woman who had wrought such lies was bound fast to the stake and consumed to ashes. And the king with his queen and her 6 brothers beside lived long thereafter in peace and gladness. The Star Money. There was once, in a quiet corner of the world, a little girl who had lost both father and mother. Death had taken them from her early, and with them vanished every comfort she had once known. No hearth burned for her, no kindly hand smoothed her hair at night, no voice spoke her name with tenderness. She was left entirely alone. So poor was she that she no longer possessed even a room to shelter her head, nor a bed on which to rest her weary body. All she had left in the world were the clothes she wore upon her thin frame, and in her hand a crust of bread, given in pity by a stranger who had passed her by. Yet though her lot was bitter, her heart remained gentle and good. She trusted in the highest one, who sees even the sparrow fall, and believed that if she gave freely, heaven would not forsake her. And so, with no one to cling to and no place to remain, she wandered out into the wide country road, her little shoes scuffing the dust, her eyes lifted to the skies as she walked. A poor man met her upon the path. His cheeks were hollow, his hands trembling with hunger, and he said in a weak voice, "Child, give me something to eat, for I am faint with hunger." The little girl looked at the dry crust of bread in her hand, her only morsel in the world. Yet without hesitation, she placed it in his palm, saying softly, "Take it, and may God bless it to your strength." The man ate, and she went on her way, now with nothing at all. Not long thereafter, she encountered a small child who sat upon a stone by the roadside, shivering in the cold dusk. He lifted his head and moaned, "My hair is bare, and the wind chills me. Give me something to cover my head." The girl untied the hood from her own head and wrapped it about the child's. Though the night air now struck her hair and ears with icy fingers, she smiled gently and went further. A short distance along, she met yet another little one, whose lips were blue, for he had no jacket, and the frost bit deep into his arms. "Sister," he cried, "I am freezing. Give me something to warm me." Without delay, she slipped off her jacket and laid it upon him. Now her arms were uncovered to the cruel air, yet she pressed forward. Before she had gone much farther, a fourth child appeared, pale as snow, who begged her for a frock, for she had none to wear but rags. The good little girl, though she had only her one frock left, gave it too, so that the poor one might not perish. Thus she came, barefoot and nearly unclothed, into the thick of a forest. The night had fallen, and the black trees rose about her like dark sentinels. In that lonely place, another child came to her, thin as a reed, and whispering, "Please, give me a little shirt, that I may not freeze in the night." The girl looked down at herself. Only her little linen shirt remained. She thought within her heart, "It is the dark of night. No one sees you. You can very well give away your little shirt also." And so, with no shame and no fear, she took it off and gave it to the child. Now she stood in the forest, stripped of all, owning nothing, not even a crumb, not even a thread to her name. Yet in that moment, as she stood trembling, her bare skin kissed by the night wind, a wonder happened. From the high vault of heaven, bright stars began to fall. They tumbled from the sky like silver blossoms shaken from an unseen tree. But these were no mere stars of light. They turned to hard, smooth pieces of gold, ringing as they struck the ground. And lo, though she had just given her last shirt away, she was clothed anew in a garment of the purest white linen, finer than any queen could wear. With it, she gathered up the golden coins that rained around her, and her arms could scarcely hold them all. From that night forth, she was rich, not only in treasure, but in blessing. And she lacked for nothing all the days of her life. Yet more than riches, she carried within her the memory that every gift given in faith is returned 100-fold, for heaven's storehouses never run empty. And so ends the tale of the little star child, who had nothing, gave all, and received from God more than she had ever dreamed. Jorinda and Joringel, once, far away and long ago, in the heart of a dense and ancient forest, there stood a castle so old that moss crept along its stones, and ivy strangled its crumbling towers. The place seemed forsaken by time itself, yet it was not empty. Within those shadowed halls dwelt a woman, bent and withered, known by no friendly name, for she was a witch. By day, she prowled in borrowed shapes, turning herself into a hissing black cat or a screech owl that glided noiselessly between the oaks. But when the sun sank behind the mountains and darkness fell, she regained her crooked human form. This witch was mistress of many dreadful arts. She could whistle beasts from the thicket and summon birds from the air, only to slaughter them cruelly and roast them over her hearth. She had woven a circle of power around her dwelling. If any wanderer strayed within 100 paces of the castle walls, their feet stiffened upon the earth, their limbs grew heavy as stone, and they could not stir until the witch herself released them. But the fate of maidens was worse still, for if a pure young girl passed into that circle, the hag's enchantment turned her instantly into a bird. The poor creature was then shut into a wicker cage and carried away to a dark chamber in the castle. There, in a single room, stood row upon row of cages, 7,000 in number, each filled with fluttering, plaintive birds, once maidens, now prisoners of feathers and sorrow. Now it happened that there lived a maiden named Jorinda, fairer than the flowers of spring, with eyes bright as morning dew. A youth called Joringel loved her dearly, and she loved him in return. Their troth was plighted, and they dreamed of the day they should wed. In those days of betrothal, their greatest joy was simply to walk side by side, whispering soft words. One evening, as twilight dappled the forest with gray and shadow, they wandered deeper than they had ever gone before. The turtle doves cooed with mournful voices upon the birch branches, and the air itself seemed heavy with a strange sorrow. Joringel, troubled, warned, "Take care, beloved, that you do not draw near to the castle of the witch." The sun was sinking, half hidden behind the mountain peaks, half flaming, yet in the sky. Jorinda, for reasons she could not name, began to weep softly. She sank down upon a stone, bathed in sunlight, and sorrow pressed upon her as though she felt the nearness of death. Joringel too grew grave, and silence fell between them. When they rose and looked about, they saw with dread that they no longer knew the way home. Through the thicket, Joringel spied a wall of ancient stone. The witch's castle was close at hand. Terror froze his heart. At that very moment, Jorinda began to sing a song, sweet but filled with doom. My little bird with necklace, red, sings sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. He sings the dove must soon be dead, sings sorrow, jug, jug, jug. Her voice faded into the cry of a nightingale, for she herself had changed into that bird, trembling upon a branch. Around her wheeled a screech owl with eyes like burning coals, crying thrice, "To who? To who? To who?" Joringel tried to run to her, but his feet clung to the earth. He could neither weep nor speak nor lift hand nor foot. He was bound as if by iron chains. The sun dipped fully beneath the hills, and twilight deepened. From the thicket hobbled forth the witch herself, crooked, yellow, and lean, with red eyes large as coals, and a nose hooked so long it nearly touched her chin. She muttered words dark and dreadful, seized the nightingale in her gnarled hand, and carried it away. Joringel stood helpless, stone still, his heart breaking. Soon the woman returned, muttering again in a hollow voice, "Greet thee, Zachiel. If the moon shines on the cage, Zachiel, let him loose at once." At that moment, Joringel's limbs were freed. He fell at the witch's feet, begging, pleading for his Jorinda. But the hag only snarled, "Never more shall she be yours," and turned away. He wept and wailed, but all in vain. Driven by grief, Joringel left that place. He wandered until he came to a distant village, where he hired himself as a shepherd. Long he tended his flocks, yet his heart was never healed. Often he strayed back toward the forest, circling the forbidden castle from afar, but never daring to cross the dreadful boundary. Then, one night, as sleep pressed upon him, he dreamed a dream. In it, he beheld a wondrous flower, blood red as a drop of heart's blood, and in its center glowed a pearl, large and shining. He dreamed he plucked this flower and bore it to the castle, and that everything he touched with it was freed from enchantment. Even Jorinda, restored to her true form. At dawn he woke and said, "If such a flower lives, I must find it, though it cost me my life." For 9 days he searched through valley and hill, meadow and moor. On the 9th morning, at break of day, he spied the very flower, crimson as fire, with a dewdrop in its heart, shining like the purest pearl. With joy burning in him, he journeyed day and night until he reached the castle once more. To his wonder, the witch's spell did not halt his steps, though he came within 100 paces. The power of the flower bore him onward. He touched the door with its petals, and lo, the door sprang wide. He passed through the courtyard and followed the sorrowful songs of countless birds. At last, he found the chamber where the 7,000 cages hung, and the witch herself moved among them, scattering crumbs and muttering foul words. When her eyes fell on Joringel, she shrieked with fury, spitting venom and gall. But she could not come nearer than 2 steps, for the flower's power held her back. Joringel heeded her not, but hastened among the cages. Oh, but there were hundreds of nightingales. How was he to know which one was Jorinda. Then, as though fate guided him, he saw the old woman lift a cage and creep toward the door. Within it fluttered a nightingale. Swift as lightning, Joringel darted forward, touched the cage with the flower, and the enchantment fell away. The bird vanished, and there stood Jorinda, radiant as before, her arms flung about his neck. And the witch? One touch of the flower broke her power forever. Never again could she bewitch maidens, nor lure beasts, nor bind the feet of wanderers. Her reign of terror ended in that hour, so Joringel and Jorinda walked free out of the castle and back into the bright world. And though the tale is old, it is told still, of how steadfast love and a single flower, red as blood, triumphed over the darkest enchantment. The water of life. There was once a king who had an illness, and no one believed that he would come out of it with his life. He had 3 sons who were much distressed about it, and went down into the palace garden and wept. There they met an old man who inquired as to the cause of their grief. They told him that their father was so ill that he would most certainly die, for nothing seemed to cure him. Then the old man said, "I know of one more remedy, and that is the water of life. If he drinks of it, he will become well again, but it is hard to find." The eldest said, "I will manage to find it," and went to the sick king, and begged to be allowed to go forth in search of the water of life, for that alone could save him. "No," said the king, "the danger of it is too great. I would rather die." But he begged so long that the king consented. The prince thought in his heart, "If I bring the water, then I shall be best beloved of my father, and shall inherit the kingdom." So he set out, and when he had ridden forth a little distance, a dwarf stood there in the road, who called to him, and said, "Whither away so fast?" "Silly shrimp," said the prince, very haughtily, "it is nothing to do with you," and rode on. But the little dwarf had grown angry, and had wished an evil wish. Soon after this, the prince entered a ravine, and the further he rode, the closer the mountains drew together, and at last the road became so narrow that he could not advance a step further. It was impossible either to turn his horse or to dismount from the saddle, and he was shut in there, as if in prison. The sick king waited long for him, but he came not. Then the second son said, "Father, let me go forth to seek the water," and thought to himself, "If my brother is dead, then the kingdom will fall to me." At first the king would not allow him to go either, but at last he yielded. So the prince set out on the same road that his brother had taken, and he too met the dwarf, who stopped him to ask, whither he was going in such haste. "Little shrimp," said the prince, "that is nothing to thee," and rode on without giving him another look. But the dwarf bewitched him, and he, like the other, rode into a ravine and could neither go forwards nor backwards. So fare haughty people. As the second son also remained away, the youngest begged to be allowed to go forth to fetch the water, and at last the king was obliged to let him go. When he met the dwarf, and the latter asked him whither he was going in such haste, he stopped, gave him an explanation, and said, "I am seeking the water of life, for my father is sick unto death. Dost thou know, then, where that is to be found?" "No," said the prince, "as thou hast borne thyself as is seemly, and not haughtily, like thy false brothers, I will give thee the information, and tell thee how thou mayest obtain the water of life. It springs from a fountain in the courtyard of an enchanted castle, but thou wilt not be able to make thy way to it, if I do not give thee an iron wand and 2 small loaves of bread. Strike thrice with the wand on the iron door of the castle, and it will spring open. Inside lie 2 lions with gaping jaws, but if thou throwest a loaf to each of them, they will be quieted. Then hasten to fetch some of the water of life before the clock strikes 12, else the door will shut again, and thou wilt be imprisoned." The prince thanked him, took the wand and the bread, and set out on his way. When he arrived, everything was as the dwarf had said. The door sprang open at the 3rd stroke of the wand, and when he had appeased the lions with the bread, he entered the castle, and came to a large and splendid hall, wherein sat some enchanted princes, whose rings he drew off their fingers. A sword and a loaf of bread were lying there, which he carried away. After this, he entered a chamber, in which was a beautiful maiden, who rejoiced when she saw him, kissed him, and told him that he had delivered her, and should have the whole of her kingdom, and that if he would return in a year, their wedding should be celebrated. Likewise, she told him where the spring of the water of life was, and that he was to hasten and draw some of it before the clock struck 12. Then he went onwards, and at last entered a room where there was a beautiful newly made bed. And as he was very weary, he felt inclined to rest a little. So he lay down and fell asleep. When he awoke, it was striking 11:45. He sprang up in a fright, ran to the spring, drew some water in a cup which stood near, and hastened away. But just as he was passing through the iron door, the clock struck 12, and the door fell to with such violence that it carried away a piece of his heel. He, however, rejoicing at having obtained the water of life, went homewards, and again passed the dwarf. When the latter saw the sword and the loaf, he said, With these thou hast won great wealth. With the sword thou canst slay whole armies, and the bread will never come to an end." But the prince would not go home to his father without his brothers, and said, "Dear dwarf, canst thou not tell me where my 2 brothers are? They went out before I did, in search of the water of life, and have not returned." "They are imprisoned between 2 mountains," said the dwarf. "I have condemned them to stay there, because they were so haughty." Then the prince begged until the dwarf released them. But he warned him, however, and said, "Beware of them, for they have bad hearts." When his brothers came, he rejoiced and told them how things had gone with him, that he had found the water of life and had brought a cupful away with him, and had rescued a beautiful princess who was willing to wait a year for him. And then their wedding was to be celebrated, and he would obtain a great kingdom. After that, they rode on together, and chanced upon a land where war and famine reigned. And the king already thought he must perish, for the scarcity was so great. Then the prince went to him and gave him the loaf, wherewith he fed and satisfied the whole of his kingdom. And then the prince gave him the sword, also wherewith he slew the hosts of his enemies, and could now live in rest and peace. The prince then took back his loaf and his sword, and the 3 brothers rode on. But after this, they entered 2 more countries, where war and famine reigned, and each time the prince gave his loaf and his sword to the kings, and had now delivered 3 kingdoms. And after that, they went on board a ship and sailed over the sea. During the passage, the 2 eldest conversed apart and said, "The youngest has found the water of life, and not we. For that our Father will give him the kingdom which belongs to us, and he will rob us of all our fortune." They then began to seek revenge, and plotted with each other to destroy him. They waited until they found him fast asleep. Then they poured the water of life out of the cup, and took it for themselves. But into the cup they poured salt seawater. Now therefore, when they arrived home, the youngest took his cup to the sick king, in order that he might drink out of it and be cured. But scarcely had he drunk a very little of the salt seawater, than he became still worse than before. And as he was lamenting over this, the 2 eldest brothers came and accused the youngest of having intended to poison him, and said that they had brought him the true water of life, and handed it to him. He had scarcely tasted it, when he felt his sickness departing, and became strong and healthy as in the days of his youth. After that, they both went to the youngest, mocked him, and said, "You certainly found the water of life, but you have had the pain, and we the gain. You should have been sharper, and should have kept your eyes open. We took it from you whilst you were asleep at sea, and when a year is over, one of us will go and fetch the beautiful princess. But beware that you do not disclose aught of this to our father. Indeed, he does not trust you, and if you say a single word, you shall lose your life into the bargain. But if you keep silent, you shall have it as a gift." The old king was angry with his youngest son, and thought he had plotted against his life. So he summoned the court together, and had sentence pronounced upon his son, that he should be secretly shot. And once, when the prince was riding forth to the chase, suspecting no evil, the king's huntsman had to go with him. And when they were quite alone in the forest, the huntsman looked so sorrowful that the prince said to him, "Dear huntsman, what ails you?" The huntsman said, "I cannot tell you, and yet I ought." Then the prince said, "Say openly what it is. I will pardon you." "Alas," said the huntsman, "I am to shoot you dead. The king has ordered me to do it." Then the prince was shocked and said, "Dear huntsman, let me live. There I give you my royal garments. Give me your common ones in their stead." The huntsman said, "I will willingly do that. Indeed, I should not have been able to shoot you." Then they exchanged clothes, and the huntsman returned home. The prince, however, went further into the forest. After a time, 3 wagons of gold and precious stones came to the king for his youngest son, which were sent by the 3 kings who had slain their enemies with the prince's sword, and maintained their people with his bread, and who wished to show their gratitude for it. The old king then thought, "Can my son have been innocent?" and said to his people, "Would that he were still alive. How it grieves me that I have suffered him to be killed." "He still lives," said the huntsman. "I could not find it in my heart to carry out your command," and told the king how it had happened. Then a stone fell from the king's heart, and he had it proclaimed in every country that his son might return and be taken into favor again. The princess, however, had a road made up to her palace, which was quite bright and golden, and told her people that whosoever came riding straight along it to her would be the right wooer, and was to be admitted, and whoever rode by the side of it was not the right one, and was not to be admitted. As the time was now close at hand, the eldest thought he would hasten to go to the king's daughter, and give himself out as her deliverer, and thus win her for his bride, and the kingdom to boot. Therefore he rode forth, and when he arrived in front of the palace, and saw the splendid golden road, he thought, it would be a sin and a shame if he were to ride over that, and turned aside, and rode on the right side of it. But when he came to the door, the servants told him that he was not the right man, and was to go away again. Soon after this, the second prince set out, and when he came to the golden road, and his horse had put one foot on it, he thought it would be a sin and a shame to tread a piece of it off. And he turned aside and rode on the left side of it. And when he reached the door, the attendants told him he was not the right one, and he was to go away again. When at last the year had entirely expired, the third son likewise wished to ride out of the forest to his beloved, and with her forget his sorrows. So he set out, and thought of her so incessantly, and wished to be with her so much that he never noticed the golden road at all. So his horse rode onwards up the middle of it, and when he came to the door, it was opened, and the princess received him with joy, and said he was her deliverer, and lord of the kingdom. And their wedding was celebrated with great rejoicing. When it was over, she told him that his father invited him to come to him, and had forgiven him. So he rode thither, and told him everything, how his brothers had betrayed him, and how he had nevertheless kept silence. The old king wished to punish them, but they had put to sea, and never came back as long as they lived.